Have a nice day, everyone. How are you today? Your Mamshi is here again, to give you a little knowledge about school life. Our lesson for today is all about evolving policy proposals. These questions are very important because they allow us to answer the goal that we want until the end. Where do we want to go? What are our end goals for improving learning? What are our medium-term objectives? Which strategies will be effective in achieving these learning goals and objectives? The statistical data gathered assists in identifying the gaps, flaws, and shortfalls and gives planners a clear understanding of the current situations. The planners can then use this information to create policy ideas that will assist them achieve their predetermined goals. Today, I will discuss to you on how to evolve the bilingual education policy in the Philippines. Background about Philippines language policy is bilingual education, mother tongue based multilingual education. And I was inspired to choose this example topic after reading a developing policy proposal about the Philippines bilingual language policy. So, let me give you a quick overview of the Philippines and how we develop the policy. And we will discuss the Philippines' two emerging policies or language policies: bilingual education policies and multilingual education based on mother tongue. So, mother tongue-based multilingual education has been our new policy since 2012. It is not new, but rather recent. To give you some context about the Philippines, when we talk about our country's politics, the Philippines is made up of 81 provinces. It consists of 17 regions, with one added in 2017 to bring the total to 18. As of 2020, we have 145 cities with a total population of more than 109 million people. So, linguistically, the Philippines has 171 living languages spoken by various ethno-linguistic groups. So, with such a small country, these 171 languages are excessive. We have 8 major languages among the 171. We focused on major languages because they have the most speakers. Bicol, Cebuano, Hiligaynon, Ilocano, Kapampangan, Pangasinan, Tagalog, and Waray are among them. In Filipino, how do you say good morning? So, take a look at the following example. If you want to say good morning in a different language, you must say it with a different accent and vocabulary. For instance, in Tagalog, magandang umaga. In Ilocano, naimbag gabigat mo. In Kapampangan, mayapanabak. In Cebuano, mayayang bantag. In Ibanag, mapiagamanaka. And in Ilonggo, mayayang aga. If you had to speak the various ethno-linguistic representatives in the Philippines, you would hear 170 different versions of good morning. And it will be chaotic if you try to speak with all 170 representatives. So, out of these 170 languages, we actually need to come up with one language that will bind us together. Now let's talk about language policy, historical perspective. Historically, the Spaniards colonized the Philippines for more than 300 years. The lingua franca at the time was Spanish. The Spaniards, however, did not teach their language to all Filipinos. They only considered it for the elite or those with high social status. So the wealthy could learn Spanish because they could afford to study abroad and at some exclusive schools in the Philippines. However, most Filipinos did not learn Spanish. The Spanish priest actually and purposefully learned the locals' language in order to convert them to Christianity. They want to spread their religion as easily as possible, so they need to communicate with the locals. After the Spaniards, the Americans colonized the Philippines for 44 years. However, the Americans taught us their language. Thus, English was the lingua franca during colonization. There was this free public school education offered by American teachers, so it was mandatory that all children attend free public school to learn the language. American teachers arrived to teach English. As a result, the medium of instruction in school was English. Teachers were trained to teach English, and all instructional materials were written in English. As a result, we could say that the Americans were successful in promoting their language and culture in the Philippines. Even though the Americans were still present in the Philippines in the 1930s, some Filipino groups demonstrated acts of resistance against them. In 1930, we needed a national language to demonstrate our political independence from the Americans. We would like to be self-sufficient. So the goal of having a national language is not to replace English as our official language, but to have a language that unites all Filipinos or that represents the Filipino people. An Executive Order 134 issued in 1937 proclaimed the adoption, development, and use of a national language. The President issued an executive order, and the National Language Institute was tasked with selecting one of the 170 languages. So, among the 170 options, the Institute suggested Tagalog. And, of course, Tagalog is the language of the center, where the government is located. As a result, choosing Tagalog is very convenient for them. However, some ethnolinguistic groups rejected the option. They inquired, "Bakit Tagalog? What languages are there? Is this your first language?" But we need to know where they came from because each group is represented by a different language. Tagalog was renamed Filipino on August 13, 1959. As a result, Filipino does not represent any linguistic group or region at this time. To quell the uproar, the word Tagalog was changed to Filipino. Because that is the only original alphabet we have. We didn't have letter F at the time, so it's Filipino. As a result, through Department Order 37, Filipino was declared as the official name of the national language. As of then, Filipino is the national language, and English is our co-official language. As a result, our country now has two official languages. But the question is how to popularize these two languages or familiarize people with the Filipino language, which is a new language to the country. As a result, they must introduce, implement, or teach Tagalog or the Filipino language to all Filipinos. So, in the education sector, they passed the Bilingual Education Policy via Department Order No. 25, Series 1974 title Implementing Guidelines for the Bilingual Education Policy. So this was the time when the two languages were recognized and had to be considered in the classroom. They must be introduced to the children, and they must learn to speak Filipino as well as English. As a result, the guidelines state that English is used as the medium of instruction for science and mathematics, while Filipino is used for all other subjects in elementary and high school. As a result, the 1974 guidelines are only applicable to high school levels. That is, after high school, there is no more bilingual education policy. Science and math are taught in English, while other subjects are taught in Filipino. It is very clear when we will use English and when we will use Filipino. There is no language overlap. We will define bilingual education in the Philippines as the use of Filipino and English as separate mediums of instruction in specific subject areas. So the definition given in the guidelines is exactly what the guidelines are about, and there is separate use of the two languages, as well as the subject areas are specified. So there will be no confusion as to what language they should use in teaching this specific subject. When the institution was established in 1987 following martial law, the bilingual education policy was ratified because there was still a problem or issue with the national language at the time. As a result, Department Order 52, Series 1987, finally declared Filipino with F rather than Filipino with P. But with F as the Philippines' official language. This Filipino is said to be less regionalistic and less connected to Tagalog. Furthermore, the Filipino language was to be developed from all local languages in the Philippines, according to the Constitution. As a result, it does not represent any specific region, but it must be a compilation of all the languages spoken in the Philippines. And English is provided by law, because we have already determined what role English plays in our society. It is also worth noting that the inclusion of regional languages as auxiliary official languages was recognized in the 1987 Bilingual Education Policy. As a result, the Philippines is now recognized as a multilingual society. Those who do not have a background in Filipino language may use the original language as their official language, with a transition to Filipino language later on. The 1987 bilingual education policy is widely regarded as one of the world's first comprehensive bilingual education experiments. We were the first in Asia to implement bilingual education, and it is still being implemented to this day. We still have the bilingual education policy in. The following are the objectives of bilingual education. 1. First, achievement of national-level competence in both Filipino and English in teaching both languages and their use as media of instruction at all levels. Remember that in 1974, the use of Filipino and English as media of instruction was limited to high school, but in 1987, it was extended to the tertiary level, which includes elementary, high school, and college or university. So bilingual education must be implemented. The ultimate goal is to become fluent in both English and Filipino. As previously discussed, I presented the majority of the subject matter were offered or taught in Filipino language, because we would like to strengthen the Filipino languages as much as we have strengthened the English language in our education. The second requirement is that regional languages be used as auxiliary languages in grades 1 and 2.3. The third is, in order for Filipinos to perform their functions and duties as Filipino citizens and in English to meet the country's needs in the community nations. Meaning, they will use language to stay connected to the outside world. And we use the Filipino language to reinforce our Filipino identity. We are Filipinos because we speak Filipino. So we will always be known as Filipinos because we speak the Filipino language, despite the fact that English is our other official language. English and Filipino, these are the roles of the Filipino language in society. 1. As a literacy language, it is most important that all Filipinos be able to read and write in Filipino. They may not be proficient in English, but they must be able to read and write. So there is no excuse for them not being able to read in Filipino, because it is taught beginning in grade 1, and when they turn on the television, they will hear Filipino language being used in mass media, which becomes our language literacy. 2. The second definition is a linguistic symbol of national unity and identity. We become one because of our Filipino language and the language of scholarly discourse and the intellectualization of the language. Since Filipino was a newly introduced language at the time, it was not yet standard. They must work on standardization or intellectualization of the language. As part of intellectualizing, use the following in scholarly discourse, such as official transactions, communications, and research. English is the international language. This will always be the international language. And the non-exclusive language of science and technology. This is the function of English in general, and in the classroom, it will be the medium of instruction for teaching science and mathematics. BAPE implementation. In early childhood education, how do we achieve bilingual education? We start with early childhood education. As I previously stated, it is applicable at all levels. English and Filipino are already used as mediums of instruction in early childhood education or preschool. Children as young as 5 years old are taught using the two languages as a medium of instruction. The objective is for them to create a childhood bilingual exam through classroom activities. Kaya, the teacher, would use English as much as possible in order for the students to develop bilingualism. Teachers are permitted to translate Filipino and English words in areas where Tagalog is not spoken or for children whose native language is not Tagalog. As previously stated, regional languages have been designated as auxiliary official languages. As a result, teachers can teach early childhood in the local language. Teachers will translate, and it will take too much time. The teachers could begin by introducing the language in the local language and then translate to Filipino and English later on. Children are also permitted to respond in a mixed language. If they are already familiar with Filipino, they can use it, and if there are words in Filipino that they do not know, they can mix it with their native language. BAPE implementation in the primary grades. This is how Filipinos used in the classroom in the primary grades. The majority of subjects taught in primary school are taught in Filipino, and they have civics and culture. Although there is an English translation, Civica and Cultura teaches in Filipino from grades 1-3. Geography, history, and civics will be replaced by Geograpia, Kasaysayan, and Civica, which will be taught in grades 4-6. or we call it the terms of Hakasi. In grades 1-6, Maccabean includes character education, music, arts, and physical education. In grades 4-6, students study home economics and livelihood education, Educación Pantauan at Pangkabuayan. As a result, in accordance with the bilingual education policy, these subjects are taught in Filipino. Some private schools use English textbooks, which is why they switch to English. However, in public schools, they must follow the guidelines that are given to them. In English, children studied mathematics from grades 1-6 and science from grades 3-6. As a result, textbooks in both public and private schools are written in English, and teachers must teach the subjects in English as well. And, while translation may occur if students do not understand, the medium of instruction is generally English. There are also language classes available in Filipino and English. It is written in English. There are two separate subjects that teach the language itself. Language and reading, the reading subject, which integrates the other language skills that begin with reading, writing, speaking, and listening, but all the topics coincide together when the teacher teaches a sentence structure in a language subject. The same tasks are performed in the reading subject. When students were in language class, the teacher expected them to write a paragraph as an output to their reading tasks. The same is true for the Filipino subject. Apart from being used as a medium of instruction, there is a separate subject that teaches the language itself. Lingua franca is all about grammars naman. Summary: English and Filipino both will be used as the medium of instruction for English. 1. Science and mathematics. For all other subjects, English is used. There is also the language subjects case to achieve bilingual competence and the inclusion of regional languages as auxiliary and initial languages for literacy, as well as some areas where the Filipino language is not familiar or accessible. BAPE implementation in the primary grades. Teachers in the primary grades share their observations of students who used Filipino as their medium of instruction. They believe that using Filipino as a medium of instruction will promote oneness of thought as a nation and pride, as well as preserve Filipino cultural and national identity. It also encourages the development of reading skills, because Filipino is the language of mass media to which the majority of children have access. By watching Tagalog drama series on TV, they can become acquainted with the Filipino language and make it more accessible to them. Children were observed to learn Filipino more easily because, even though our languages sound different and have some similarities in terms of orthography, we have the same spelling system. We spell with syllables, and they found the similarity beneficial for students learning Filipino. BAPE implementation. In the government education sector did an excellent job of implementing bilingual education. Other societal stakeholders were also involved in the implementation of the bilingual policy. 1. The government even issued Executive Order 335, which encourages the use of the Filipino language. Because we've been using English for so long, the government used English in all transactions, and it is past time for them to pay attention to the Filipino language so that there is a balance in the amount of importance given to these two languages. As a result, the government employs Filipino in official transactions, communications, and correspondence at both the national and local levels. The reason for this is that they want the Filipino people to appreciate all of the government projects and programs when they are stated in a language that they understand. If the people do not support the government's projects, they will fail. They would not appreciate each beauty if they did not understand the project's purpose or because it was written in English. However, if it is written in Filipino, a language that is common, easy, and familiar to them, they will support government programs. 2. Names of offices, buildings, and signboards should be translated into Filipino, with English translations provided below. Originally, they were named in English, but a change was made so that the Filipino name comes first, followed by the English translation in small letters below that office or building, etc. This is how the government encouraged bilingual education in the workplace. Application of the BAPE in higher education. Higher education was also involved because it was in charge of intellectualizing the Filipino language. Their ultimate objectives, as stated in the 1987 policy, Higher Education updated the General Education curriculum to align it with the bilingual education policy. Language courses at the college level, whether in Filipino or English, should be taught in that language. All university and college levels, their major will be required to take general education courses regardless of their course. Literature subjects may be taught in English, Filipino, or any other language at the discretion of the higher education institution. Humanities and social sciences courses are typically taught in Filipino. Because textbooks are in English and teachers occasionally use English, there is nothing wrong if we use English, but the policy states that it is preferable not to use Filipino. But there has recently been a change in the general education curriculum in higher education as a result of the K-12 basic education program. The K-12 program was implemented by the Department of Education in 2012. Originally, the Philippines only had a 10-year basic education. We have 6 years of elementary school and 4 years of high school, but in K-12 there is an additional 2 years of senior high school. The general education subjects that we had in college, English, Filipino, literature, humanities, and social sciences, were all moved down to senior high school. Because senior high school is similar to our first and second years in the previous curriculum, the Commission replaced the old general education courses with a new set of curriculum. Despite this, the policy remained unchanged. The subjects will continue to be taught in either Filipino or English. Actually, it is based on the university's recommendation whether they could choose between the Filipino and English versions of the new curriculum. What teachers do? The teachers actually have a very difficult task in this policy, because how successful or how unsuccessful the program will be, but sometimes it depends on how the teacher implemented in the classroom. So if the teacher take it seriously, we have a very successful bilingual education. There are some expectations from our teachers. 1. Speak the local language in teaching non-Tagalog speaking children. Since part of the provision of the policy is the use of the regional languages, so teacher cannot insist to use Filipino or English if the students are not familiar to those languages. The teachers must use the language of the learners in order to teach what she needed to teach to. Teach subjects in Filipino or English as stated in the department order. 3. Teach English and Filipino as language subjects to promote bilingual competence. If you are the teacher in English language, it is important to display competency, and you have to show competency in the language whether it is Filipino or English, because you are the model in the classroom. 4. Teachers attend service trainings. The Department of Education provided them trainings in teaching English, Filipino and all the subjects so that they could develop language growth and professional growth. 5. Provide assistance or prepare instructional materials if there are problems with instructional materials, especially in the areas where a bit difficult to bring materials because they are too far. Teachers must be resourceful and creative in preparing instructional materials for their students. Ganun naman po talaga tayo po. There are more materials in English than in Filipino, and if teachers are really serious in teaching Filipino to their students, they have to devise instructional materials so that they could bridge the gap between the scarcity and the materials in English and Filipino. 6. Display competency in English and/or Filipino language. The preparation is content and pedagogy on how to teach the language and what to teach, so that in the event that they go to school to teach on their own, they should be ready to teach any subject, because they've been prepared to do that. Policy on bilingual education. There may be some areas of the bilingual policy that require further investigation. Although students are our primary customers, the bilingual education policy continues to harm some of them. One challenge that researchers identified in terms of bilingual implementation was what we call academic marginalization, which means that Tagalog-speaking children are placed in a better position or given an advantage over non-Tagalog-speaking children, because when children whose first language is Tagalog go to school, the medium of instruction will be Filipino and English. They must improve their Filipino language skills, because it is their mother tongue. They only need to learn English in school, and learning English alone is difficult, let alone learning 2 other languages at the same time. Multilingual education based on mother tongue (MTB-MLE) (1.D.0) was implemented in 2012. 16s. 2012. As part of the K-12 curriculum, these MT-BEAMLY were implemented in 2012 as part of the K-12 basic education curriculum under Department Order 16 series. When the K-12 curriculum was implemented, the Basic Education Department also implemented the MT-BEAMLY. The argument is that students learn best when they bring their primary or home languages to school. This is based on research by UNSDO and the Department of Education. In some areas, the Tagalog language is not widely spoken, so they attempted to teach the students in their mother tongue. One group used their mother tongue, while the other used Filipino and English. And the students who were taught in their mother tongue performed better on their achievement test than the other group of students. These experimental study did not only happen in one region, but they tried it in some areas as well, and they found it effective for those children were in the experimental group. That's why they believe that MT-BEAMLY will show that learning among Filipino children in school is facilitated best through the mother tongue. Mother tongue-based multilingual education come from one of the provisions of bilingual education. One provision is, regional languages shall be used as auxiliary languages grades 1 and 2 in MT-B. It was only strengthened written in the policy itself. It was not a new policy. After all this time, it is implemented in the whole country. BAPE and MT-B run concurrently in the current Philippine education system. Kindergarten through grade 3 MT-BEAMLY used as a regional or native tongue in instruction, education, teaching materials, and assessment. The mother tongue is the medium of instruction, and there will be a gradual transition when they reach grade 4. Slowly, the teacher introduced Filipino and English as a medium of instruction until the students are familiar with the two languages and they become the primary means of instruction. When they meet in grades 5 and 6 to go to high school, it will be pure English and Filipino. And all the way to college. In terms of language policies, this is now our current educational system. Bilingual education was not replaced. Rather, it was supplemented to assist students whose first language is not Tagalog. Multilingual education in the mother tongue MT-BEAMLY. Initial challenges: a scarcity of educational materials. You must translate materials into multiple languages. It is unavoidable that there will be a problem with instructional materials. The department will need to hire a large number of writers, speakers of the language to create instructional materials. These are the preliminary challenges resulting from implementation. Some studies have been conducted, and these are some of the results of those studies. The department is most likely addressing the issues. 2. Language proficiency of the teacher. Mother tongue. The teacher who will be in charge of the mother tongue must be fluent in that language. However, there is a problem if the teacher was not born in that area and is not fluent in that language. These are some of the issues that arose during the implementation of the mother tongue-based curriculum. 3. Other languages are excluded from the policy. 19 identified. There were 170 different languages. In the first year of MT-BEAMLY implementation, only 8 major languages were included in the curriculum. In 2016, 11 new languages were added, bringing the total to 19. However, many groups are dissatisfied with the 19. They believe that the 19 languages will not adequately represent the 170 languages that we have. This could be another topic of discussion. The Department of Education is working on these various challenges to address the curriculum issues raised by teachers, parents, and the community. We're almost done, and I hope I can impart some valuable lessons to everyone. I simply want to share the proverb. Being bilingual has advantages that extend beyond the ability to communicate in another language. Bilingualism provides children with a broader understanding of the world. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, heart, and follow and leave your comment in the comments area. Thank you, and God bless.